Sighting a strange light or unusual object in the sky can be cause enough for a scare, but when driving along a lonely country road and said object appears to be following and interested in observing you, it can be truly terrifying. What follows are a few accounts from people who have been chased along lonely roads by something unknown. Paul Burgoyne was driving home in the early hours of the 22nd of September 1979 on the Ganangra Road in northern Perth, Western Australia, when he saw a glowing white light. At first he took it for a light on a pole by the side of the road, but as he drove past, the light moved. Paul came to a halt and turned off his radio, and got out to look more closely at the odd light. His stomach churned as he realised it was a cylindrical object about 8 metres long, with a band of glowing white light around the middle. A red light was shining down at the ground, and even though he was barely 50 metres away from the craft, he heard no sounds coming from it. It was moving along slowly, so the man returned to his car and attempted to shine his headlights on it to get a better view, but it suddenly rose vertically at extreme pace and vanished into the night sky. A month earlier, in August 1979, a former policewoman was travelling along the Murchison Highway in Tasmania, between Queenstown and Hatfield, when she observed a green light in the night sky. Although it seemed a long way off, the light illuminated her car's interior. When it did so, her car lost power, and its clock and her wristwatch both stopped at 9:28 p.m. When the light disappeared, her accelerator began working once more, and she drove on, no doubt relieved to get to her destination. Graham Roberts, a 43-year-old builder, was motoring with his 3 children between Inglewood and Riola in Victoria on Saturday night, the 9th of February 1980, when a silent basketball-shaped light began following the car. The children were frightened by the manifestation, as it kept pace with the vehicle for 5 minutes. Then it was joined by a second identical light, giving out a white glow, which also followed the car. It was not revealed how the incident ended. On Sunday night, the 4th of August 1963, a young couple, both 18 years of age, Ronnie Austin and Phyllis Bruce, had gone to see the movie The Great Escape at a drive-in theatre at Mount Vernon, Illinois, in Ronnie's 1956 Ford Victoria. They left about 11:30 p.m, taking Route 15 east towards Wayne City, where they both lived. When he leaned over to speak to Phyllis, Ronnie noticed a fuzzy light at treetop level towards the southwest. It was likened to the shape of a wash tub. The couple glanced at the light, making comments about it for several minutes. They noticed that it kept pace with the car, slowing down when they did, and speeding up when they did. When they were about 6 miles west of the intersection with the Orchardville Road, the object, which had been on the southern side of the car, crossed in front of them and took up a position towards the north. Then the object came towards the car, getting within a few hundred feet before rising and hovering briefly over an electronic relay tower. Then it zipped back towards the car and held a position about 500 feet away from them. At this point they turned north up a gravel road leading to Phyllis's home, 1.5 miles away. The object followed them all the way to the house. Phyllis's sister Forestine had also noticed the light by then, and all 3 observed it. As it appeared to come nearer, they went inside, turned the lights off, and observed it through a window. After 15 minutes of this, Ronnie decided he needed to make a break for home. He ran to his car and drove away. Becoming scared at seeing the object renew the chase, he wondered if the object had waited for him to be alone. He turned onto another gravel road when the UFO suddenly shot diagonally across in front of him and hovered over a barn, changing from a brilliant white to a dull orange light. Ronnie estimated he was going 120 miles per hour as he topped the hill near the barn. The dull orange flared brightly, and the object came straight toward the car, hovering about 100 feet away. Ronnie reckoned it was about the size of an automobile. As it hovered above him, his car radio suddenly burst forth in a whining static, and he felt a cooling sensation. The object passed over, turned, and came back, making a whirring sound as it did so, this time causing the engine of Ronnie's car to splutter. Luckily for him, the object returned to the barn and he was able to continue driving the remaining 3 miles home. As he drove down the lane leading to his home in Keens, Illinois, the craft flew across the road behind him. Ronnie skidded into the yard and raced inside the house, the pursuer now hovering 300 metres away, above another farmhouse. Waking his parents, Ronnie was incoherent as he tried to explain. His father Orville grabbed a shotgun, thinking somebody had tried to attack his lad, but when he stepped outside and saw the UFO, he realised what had frightened the young man so badly. The object glided above a field toward the witnesses, who retreated inside and switched off the lights, believing they were attracting it. They watched it through the kitchen window for a while. Ronnie picked up the phone to call the Fairfield, Illinois police to report the strange intruder, only to find the phone was dead. Ronnie's mother, sister and brother also saw the object that night. When the family tried again at 12:25 a.m, the phone worked, and although the police thought they were joking, they came out to the farm, and they too saw the UFO. Several friends and neighbours alerted to the hubbub saw an object until about 4 a.m, but they may have been mistakenly watching a star and not the original object. Dogs barked all night, and after the incident, Ronnie was too troubled by it to go out at night for some time. On the 10th of August 1963, Ronnie was interviewed by a three-man team from the United States Air Force Project Blue Book. After hearing his story, Ronnie was asked to wash the car. Then the team were noted taking some sort of readings from various areas of the auto. It was thought they were checking for elevated levels of radioactivity or anomalous magnetic readings. Usually a local UFO officer would come out to check a routine case, but the three men who investigated included the current director, Lieutenant Colonel Friend, and his subsequent replacement director, Major Quintanilla, suggesting the Air Force thought it was an important case. Later in the 1960s, and half a world away, more young people were terrified by their encounter. Millicent is a country town in the southeast of South Australia. On the night of Saturday, the 15th of November 1969, strange lights were seen all over the area, from Naracoorte to Bordertown. At around 11:30 p.m, 18-year-old Dennis Watson was driving along the Lake Bonnie Road towards Millicent. His passenger was Sharon Smith, and behind in another car followed his mate, another 18-year-old, named Trevor Cranage. Dennis glanced to the side and noticed two green lights about 200 feet off the ground approaching from the rear. Dennis was so surprised he couldn't take his eyes off the lights and drove up an embankment as he watched them disappear into a gully. Trevor had also observed the dull green lights, one of which he saw was emitting sparks. Pulling up next to his friend's car, they turned off their lights in case they were attracting the attention of the object. As they sat there, they could hear a shrill, piercing whistle like a jet engine idling. Dennis and Sharon exited via the front passenger door, and together the three of them ran off across a paddock in fright. Even a mile away they could hear the whistling noise, and could see the sky glowing in the direction where they had last seen the green lights. They had passed cattle as they fled, and noticed that after they had initially settled down again, they became stirred up again, as if something was following them. The trio lay down in some long grass to conceal themselves, and waited about half an hour before continuing on home. Dennis had left his shoes in the car and made the entire journey in his socks. Dennis's father said his son's eyes were bulging when he got home, and he had never seen his boy so scared before. They were driven back to their cars by a friend, and found that both vehicles were covered in a thick coating of dust. Although Dennis and Sharon had used the front door to leave the car, they found one of the back doors open and a window rolled down. Nothing had been taken from the car. Dennis's watch and some money were still in place. The next day, a group returned to the scene and inspected the gully for signs that the light had landed, but found no evidence. While Dennis didn't damage his car driving off the road, two teenagers in New Zealand had more bother in September 1968. John Dow and Paul Franklin had become intrigued by a spate of local reports and had staked out the Taradale dump for several nights and seen strange lights. Then one night one of the lights came after them. Speeding off, they found the light catching up until it filled the back window. "Bail out, it's got us," yelled John, and both young men jumped from the car, which was travelling at 65 kilometres an hour. John began to stand when Paul implored him to stay down, "They're after us," he said. What happened to the UFO isn't stated, but the car crashed into a fruit shop. 2 months later, 19-year-old Dow had dangerous driving charges dismissed, as the magistrate believed he had acted involuntarily while in a panicked state of mind. The magistrate believed the lights were merely those of another car. Near Silerton, Tennessee, a small town with a population of 111, on the morning of the 27th of January 2015, a newspaper delivery man's day started to get strange at about 5 a.m, when he heard the sound of a helicopter. At first he couldn't see the craft, but then he espied it over some trees when he had driven 4 miles down the road. Turning a corner, he was able to see that there were 3 military helicopters in the air. The witness thought there may have been some sort of accident, but couldn't see anything, so passed it off. At 6:15 a.m, as he continued on his route, on a straight stretch of road in a secluded area with little population, he suddenly became aware of 2 bright stars in the sky, both much brighter than Venus. The lights were travelling together on opposite sides of the road. Figuring if he could see them, they could see him, he decided to flash his headlights at them to see their reaction. He came to a halt and flashed his lights in a distinct order, 2 times fast, and a pause for about half a second, and then flashed a second time. As he continued driving, he noticed both lights had stopped still. The driver reported that the object on the right blinked, and then the object on the left blinked, and then together they blinked about half a second later, in the exact sequence he had flashed his lights. Abruptly the man felt scared by this turn of events, and panicked, driving into the nearest driveway and parking behind some trees to shield himself from the view of the objects. He grabbed his mobile phone to call his wife and let her know what was happening. As he looked at the phone, the battery charge dropped from 92% to 0 and shut itself down. The radio, like in the other cases, fell silent. Then, however, it produced static which pulsed in the same sequence which he had flashed his lights. Abandoning the remainder of his route, he drove away, intending to reach home as quickly as he could. As he drove away, he saw the object still hovering at treetop height. His journey took him along a tree-lined road where he felt safer. He could not see the objects in his rear-view mirror, and breathed a sigh of relief. The sky was cloudy and no stars visible. Dawn was due to break, but the overcast sky kept night lingering that little longer, when as the trees thinned out somewhat he saw the objects, one above the other, following him off to the side, and flashing a beam of light shining out in all directions, like a light projected onto a fog. The witness was desperate to get away from the ominous lights, but if he slowed down, so did they. If he gained speed, they followed suit. His escape took him down Montezuma Road, and then he chose to take Wilson School Road, where again he had tree cover. Here also he found himself behind a school bus. Glancing at the sky, he was relieved to see the objects had departed. He continued 2 miles onto Sanford Road. The objects reappeared. He was back at the spot he had seen the helicopters earlier, and they were there again as well, 2 of them heading towards the lights. At this point the objects disappeared for good. The radio came back on, and the man's phone battery returned to 92%. The man reported the incident immediately to MUFON, saying he felt uncomfortable about even telling his wife, and was nervous about doing his job the next morning. He asserted it was without doubt the most bizarre thing which had ever happened to him. Probably a comment most of the participants of these nighttime chases might echo, when something strange and sinister has pursued them from the dark corners of history.